Welcome to Developing the Young Workforce Newsscape with me, your host, Aidan. And today I'm joined by the wonderful David. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
And we are here to talk about how to get into his profession of writing and producing. And can you tell everyone where you are just now?
I'm in Los Angeles, right near the ocean in a part of Los Angeles called Santa Monica. You might, if you're a show from the 1970s called Three's Company, was set in Santa Monica. So if you ever see that old sitcom, they're walking along the Santa Monica Pier. That's where we live.
So it's 6 o'clock in the evening here. And what's the time over with you?
10 o'clock in the morning.
Well, thank you for getting up so early and for giving up your time to support developing the young workforce and to help me show young people how to get into your profession and tips on how to cope through lockdown. So, David, how would people know you?
Well, I work in film and television primarily as a writer, but I've also been a producer and a director. So I've worked on a couple of projects that people might have seen. Some of my early projects were teen comedies like the American Pie movies. I worked on American Pie 2 and American Pie Book of Love and American Pie Girls Rules, which just came out. So I did a lot of sort of teen sex comedies in the beginning of my career. And I've also done some animation. I've worked on Puss in Boots. I worked on The Simpsons. And most recently, I've been focusing on television. And I just created and was the showrunner on a show on Netflix called No Good Nick. It was about a teen con artist, a 13-year-old girl who shows up at a family and pretends to be a long-lost relative, but she's really a con artist. So that came out on Netflix last year, and there was 20 episodes.
That was an amazing show. I watched it during lockdown. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's okay. And what episode of The Simpsons did you write then?
Well, I only wrote one episode. It was, let's see, in 2015, it was called PayPal. Like the premise was, it was the Mother's Day episode that Marge finds out that Lisa doesn't have any friends at school. And so she decides to pay a girl to be friends with her behind Lisa's back. And Lisa finds out that her new best friend at school is being paid by Marge, and it causes a big rift between mother and daughter. So that was an episode, like I said, 2015 that I wrote, and it was just a one-time freelance episode. But interestingly, that episode got nominated for a Writers Guild Award, even though it was my only episode. I didn't win, but still got nominated. It was nice. Let's see, let's see if you can see it. This is the Writers Guild nomination.
Wow.
That's for the Simpsons episode.
That's outstanding. How did you get into your sector of work?
Well, I actually went to film school, but it was my second career. After university, I went to law school. So I was a lawyer for a couple of years. I didn't like it at all. It was kind of a miserable grunt work. And a friend of mine had told me that there was a program out in California. I grew up on the East Coast of the United States, and there was a program in Los Angeles at the University of Southern California called the Peter Stark Producing Program. So I applied to that school while I was still practicing law. Secretly, I didn't tell anyone that I was doing this. And then when I got in, I quit my job, drove across the country with my dad, and went to film school. And that summer, after I had gotten into film school, I started writing because I thought that when I got to LA, and I had never been to Los Angeles before, but I thought everyone would have a screenplay, and they would know so much more than I did because I was from the East Coast and I didn't know anything about the industry. So I tried to learn as much as I can. I was watching all the classic movies and writing a screenplay because I thought that that would be expected of me. And when I got there, I kind of didn't realize that in the producing program, no one had a screenplay because that was for the writing program. But because they were all people who wanted to be producers, they all wanted to read my screenplay because I was the only one who had one. So people started passing it around. And this was this kind of a stupid comedy that I wrote in the late 1990s. I'll tell you that the premise was about an overweight guy. It was supposed to be played by Chris Farley. He died before you were born, I'm sure, but he was alive at the time. And he was on Saturday Night Live, but Chris Farley was supposed to be this overweight guy who wakes up in an alternate universe where heavy people are sexy and skinny people are, anyways, that was the whole premise. It was a kind of a dumb comedy, but people thought it was funny and they passed it around, and I got my first agent from that one screenplay. And then I started writing full time. I realized that writing was really what I wanted to focus on. And so I started writing. And while I was in film school, that's when I wrote the first screenplay that actually sold, which was called Slackers. And that became a movie that came out in 2002. And that was my first script sale and my first movie.
So if someone wants to start writing, how would you say to someone they would develop an idea? Because a lot of people know the basis of what they want to write about. Is it love, or is it dogs, or is it cats? And they have a rough idea, but they don't actually know how to write for which character and who goes where.
Right. Well, I think that the question is, first of all, where do you have to kind of work backwards. Where do you see this in your best case scenario, in your fantasy world? Is this a TV show?
Mm-hmm.
Is it on, which channel is it on? I'm trying to, excuse me if I'm making stuff up here. Is it on BBC Three? Is it a movie that's in theaters? Is it something that's on Netflix? So is this a film or TV show? Is it live action or animated? Or even outside of my area, is it a play? Is it something that you're putting up on in a theater that is going to be, a live theater production? Or is it a novel? And that's also, a possibility. I don't really do that, but you can just as easily sit home and write a novel and finish the whole thing. And if it's great, go out and get an agent and sell a novel, and you're a published author. So you have to decide, where is this going to be at the end of the day? And that's going to determine the format and the structure and kind of define the story, because there's certain basic elements. If it's a movie, it's going to be a contained story. It's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. If it's a TV series, it has to have a premise and character. All these are going to have great characters, but a TV series has to have a premise that can have more than one episode that's going to continue on and, maybe have 20, 30, 100 episodes. So the difference between film and TV is basically whether it's open-ended or a continuing or a close-ended story. And then whether or not it's a novel, is this a story that's very internal? Is this a story that's going to talk a lot about what the person's thinking or their point of view? That's much more difficult to convey in a visual medium like film and television. So then maybe this is better suited for writing it as a novel. Some things can be both, of course, like Harry Potter can be a novel and a movie, but some novels are hard to turn into movies because there's so much about what people are thinking. Mm-hmm. So once you've kind of figured, and then of course, I don't know what makes a great theater production, but that's another way of going. So I think if you're a young person and you're trying to, and you have a great idea for something that you want to turn into some form of media, the first question you have to ask yourself is like, which one? Because if it's going to be a movie, which I think is what a lot of people, their first thought is, okay, well, could be a good movie. Then you have to follow a very specific structure to write that script so that the movie meets the certain act breaks and has a certain page length. You can't write at least for America, you can't write a 200-page screenplay because it's too long. It's just, we don't make movies that are that long. So, and if it's going to be a TV show, then it's even more specific. Then is it a half-hour TV show or an hour-long TV show? Is it a comedy or drama? It gets very compartmentalized. Is it a TV show that would be on this type of channel or this cable type channel? Is it Game of Thrones or is it, Cheers? So defining all of that is going to determine what the structure and format of the product is going to look like. And again, if it's a novel, it can be 800 pages long. But once you figure out all that, then it's a matter of doing the research and figuring out what do these things look like. So, because the last thing you want to do is say, well, I didn't follow the way everyone else did it, but mine's so good that it doesn't matter because I can make my screenplay the wrong page length and have it the wrong font and no one's going to care, because they do care. So if you find the project that's as close to what you want to do as possible, get the script or the novel or the manuscript or whatever it is and follow that format. because that's going to guide you as to how to do it correctly, so that people will accept it and not think that, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing, I'm not even going to read it.
How old were you when you first experienced anything to do with writing or producing?
Because I had been a lawyer, I moved to Los Angeles and started film school when I was 27. So I was writing for about 2 years, 3 years maybe. I think I sold Slackers, my first screenplay that I got paid money for, was when I was 30. So, and by the way, no matter what age you break in, you always think that you're too old, and that you waited too long. And when I was 30, I thought, oh, my whole career is like over. I haven't broken in yet. And in retrospect, it seemed like I was really young. But you have to have, I think one of the problems in writing is that you have to have the life experience to write upon. If you can have great ideas and invent a whole world and unique characters, but if you haven't lived a life to draw upon, it's sometimes hard to make that thing you're trying to write realistic. So I think it's difficult. People have done it, but it's difficult to write a professional quality screenplay or television pilot. If you're 15, it's possible, but it would probably have to be about being a 15-year-old. But if you're trying to write about a character who's like married and has kids and has a job and whatever, you might not have the life experience to really make that seem realistic. So that's why I think that it takes years of practice to get to a point where it becomes of a professional quality.
Did you have any jobs before you were a writer and producer? And if so, how did you make the transition?
Well, like I mentioned, the first job I had was as a lawyer. I don't think I had any significant jobs, just summer jobs I was a plumber for the summers. My dad had a plumbing company, so I was always doing plumbing. But aside from that, my only career was as a lawyer, and I did that for 4 years. And for me, the way to make the transition, and I don't know if this is going to work for anyone else, but I just quit. I quit working. I had saved enough money so I could afford to go back to school. And so I had a 4-year gap between my previous schooling to when I started school again. And honestly, it was a great experience, because going back to school after working, you really appreciate it more. I think when you're in school, you think school is a drag, and you have homework and it's kind of a hassle, and you're looking forward to going out in the real world and making a living. And then when you're making a living, you're like, oh, I wish you could go back and be a student again, and I don't have to like worry about paying the bills and a boss telling you have to work on the weekends. So going to school was really a pleasure when I was older, but I think I took it for granted when I was younger. So when I went back to film school at like age 27, I really worked hard and made sure that I was understanding it, because I didn't want to fail and have to go back to being a lawyer. That was the big threat in my mind.
So out of the work that you have said you've done, such as Puss in Boots, Simpsons, No Good Nick, American Pie, which would you say is your most favorite work or the best work that you have done?
It's definitely No Good Nick. And here's the reason, is that it's a strange situation when you're writing for a film, because the film business is largely a director's medium. It's the director makes a lot of the important decisions. And as a writer of a film, you turn in your script, and then they often will say, thank you, we got all we need, you're fired, or we don't need you anymore. And you're not even invited to the set to watch it being produced a lot of the times, because they don't need you anymore. You've already done your job. And so you're just someone who's hanging around, who's getting in the way. So in the film business, the directors really do a lot of the important decision making, and the producers. And as a result of that, they go through writers. So for example, you might write a script and they love it, they buy it, and then they hire someone else to rewrite it. And you're confused. Why did you hire someone else if you liked my script so much and you wanted to pay me to do it? But that's kind of the way the film business works. They just try to get more points of view. So it's a serial business of the writers being hired in a row, but not at the same time. So you don't necessarily meet the next writer who rewrites you, and that person might get fired. On Puss in Boots, there were 5 writers. I was the first, and there were 4 after me. I never met them. They never met me. You don't meet the person before or after you. And then when they get to the point where they want to make it, they don't need any more writers. So as a result, I guess this is a long way of saying that those film projects aren't as much your vision as you would want them to be. It's a little bit sad, but you spend all this time creating a world, creating characters, and create this movie, and then they pay you to take it away from you, and that's the deal you make. You say, I'll take your money, you take my screenplay, but when they take your screenplay, they can do whatever they want. So when Slackers was my first movie that got made, there was another writer that came on, and he wrote a lot of the jokes. And like sometimes people will say, oh, I saw that movie. I love the scene where they did this. And I, in my head, say like, oh, I didn't write that scene. The other writer who didn't even get credit wrote it. And, you know, you of course want to be gracious. Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate, you know, you liking the movie. But in your head, you're like, I didn't write that. And that's true in the movie business, is that it may be, if you're lucky, it's 50% what you wrote or 60% what you wrote. So it's hard to be as proud of projects that, and it's a collaborative medium. There's a lot of people involved. But if you're not the director of that movie, you probably didn't put, you know, your vision is not going to be close to 100%. And TV, on the other hand, it's completely the opposite. In TV, if you create a pilot, then you're also the producer, or we're known as the executive producer and showrunner. Then because you're doing it week after week, and it's not just one episode, they need you to keep writing more and more episodes. The relationship's different because it's a repeat business. So you work together with a room of writers, where there might be 10, 12 writers. And as the show creator and showrunner, you're in charge of the room, and people can pitch ideas and say, well, what if this, instead of this joke, it's this joke? And you go, that's great, I love it. Let's put that in the script. And so you're deciding what goes in and what doesn't go in. Of course, the network ultimately has the say on all the decisions, but maybe it's 95% your vision instead of 60%. It's never 100, because there's still the people who pay the money get to make the final decision. But in the television business, the show creator, executive producer, showrunner, which is usually the same person, and then I created No Good Nick with my wife, who is my co-showrunner. You're the person that's making these creative decisions. You're the person that's meeting with the production designer to design the sets, the costume designer who's picking what people are wearing. Every week when we made No Good Nick, you're walking down to the stage, and the costumer is saying, here's what Nick's going to wear in this scene. And you're like, yes, no, whatever. You make decisions. And because of that process, it's so much more fulfilling creatively. And I think I'll go as far as to say that's why the television business has eclipsed the film business as a much better medium for creative people. And, you know, you're too young to really see the transition, but before like 2000, people wanted to go into the film business because that's where all the best stuff was happening. And TV was kind of like, well, if you can't make it in the film business, then you can be a TV writer as sort of a backup plan. It's completely flipped in, you know, starting, you know, I could go on for hours about this, but, you know, starting with like The Sopranos and like really Game of Thrones, premier shows that really raised the bar of how good TV could be. And of course, with the advent of all the streaming networks, television is where all the great writing is now. And it's where all the best things are being made. And the film business is still the film business, and there's still good movies here and there. But when you think about it, ignoring the pandemic, you know, I used to ask people before the pandemic, like, what's the last great movie you saw in a theater? And they'll say, well, it's usually some superhero movie or something. But like, say, okay, what about a comedy? What's a great comedy that you saw in a movie theater? And they kind of don't really make them anymore. Really, the best writing, and this is just my opinion, I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me, the best writing is in TV these days. And it's because the people who are doing the creative work are entrusted to make the decisions. And so I think that's a better process. The film business is just a little bit more, I don't know what to call it, but that's a long way of saying that No Good Nick is what I'm really proud of, because that's the show we created, and we had input on every decision and the whole arc of the 20 episodes. was exactly how we laid it out. And, you know, I could watch it over and over again and I'm not like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm very proud of that show.
So someone like Jerry Trainer, who's known for his work on iCarly as Spencer Shea, or Sean Austin, who's known for his work as a voiceover artist on Special Agent Oso, do you get to choose who gets to play which role, or do you have an input of you think this person's suited?
Yes. Well, one of the greatest things about working in television and being the executive producer is that you do get a say in casting. Like by comparison on Slackers, you know, I would just get an email if I was lucky saying, hey, here's who's going to be in the movie. And no one asked me my opinion. But on No Good Nick, you cast the show. So my wife and I are in the casting sessions. There's a casting director who brings people to you. They're sort of out there looking for the right type. And they're like, what about this person? What about this person? And you can say yes, no. And of course, the network, Netflix, is ultimately in charge of making the decision, but it's a collaborative process. It's just Netflix and you. So together, you kind of reach a consensus. And so, you know, when the idea came up, ooh, what if the dad was Sean Astin from, you know, Lord of the Rings? We're like, wow, would he even be willing to do this? He's such a big movie star. And then he was interested and he came in and we sat down with him and he read for the part and we're like, oh, this would be great. And then you have a discussion with Netflix and it's like, we think he's great. What do you think? And they're like, we think he's great. Okay, so then we're on the same page and then you cast him. So when it comes to casting, you know, the 5 lead actors, it's a decision between the network and the creator with the casting director helping you figure out who's available and who's interested, because you might say, oh, I want this person and that person's not available or they're not interested. So the casting director is going to bring you the choices and then the Netflix and the creators are going to make the decisions. And so similarly, when it comes to guest cast, so there's sort of 3 types of actors that are on a TV show. There's the regulars, that's the lead cast. So there's 5 regulars, it's the family and Nick on No Good Nick. Then there's the recurring characters, that's like the volunteer squad. They're in a lot of episodes, or the Harbaughs, but they're not in every episode. And then there's the guest cast. They're usually in one episode. So depending on how many episodes they're in, you might have more involvement in the decision or less. You might say, if it's just someone who has one line, you might just get a video from the casting director of 5 auditions and say, oh yeah, I like number 4 the best. And you don't actually meet them in person. But for like someone like Jerry Trainer, you know, that's an idea that was presented to us by the casting director. We thought it was fantastic. He's amazing. And so it was something that everyone agreed on right away, but we were more involved in that decision, but not as much as the 5 lead actors.
Yes. How would you say you're so well known today?
How would I say it? How would I'm, could you ask me that again?
How would you say that your work is so well known?
How is my work so well known?
Yes.
Well, I don't know how well known it is, but I mean, I've been lucky enough to get things made. I mean, the problem when you're a writer is that you can be a successful writer and nothing ever gets made and they still pay you to write it and you just get unlucky. And so there's a lot of anonymous writers who do very well, but I've been lucky enough that a bunch of my things have been produced. So, I mean, I think that people, you know, when you're involved in a project that is famous like The Simpsons, then people know that one, even though that one was something that I worked on for very little time. It was just something I worked on for less than a month. But because it's The Simpsons, everyone knows it. And the American Pie series, it's something that was created before I started. My first one was American Pie 2, so I didn't work on the first movie. But because it's such a huge franchise, people know it. So people tend to know my work from things that are more famous, not because of me, but because I happen to work on a famous project. So like, I don't think of the American Pie movies as like the main thing I've done in my career, but they're known more than other. And Puss in Boots, you know, that was a big hit movie, but I was just one of the 5 writers and I didn't wind up even getting the writing credit. I think the last 2 writers got the credit. So, you know, and then of course, when No Good Nick comes out, the benefit of Netflix is that it's in almost every country and all over the world, and it gets released simultaneously everywhere. So we actually have a lot of fans in the UK. We have a lot of fans in Brazil. For some reason, No Good Nick is really popular in Brazil. So I've been studying my Portuguese and talk to the fans on Twitter in Portuguese. And, you know, it's just luck when something gets made and it gets distributed. That's out of your hands. If the network is sending it out all over the world, then you're going to be more well known than if you make some indie film that's only seen by a few people. That could be amazing, but if people haven't seen it, you don't get as well known.
If someone came up to you and said, "Hello, David, how do I get into writing and producing?" what would you say?
There's no one answer.
Okay.
Unlike being a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist or an electrician, where there's a very clear-cut way on how to do that, there's no one way to get into what I'm doing. I think the most obvious thing is, if you want to write. Start writing, figure out what you want to write, and write it. You can't become a writer if you don't write. So make the thing that you want to make, write it. And by the way, you can make a short film and go shoot it with your phone, put it on YouTube, see if it's any good, see what people are saying, get, criticism, and get better and better. I mean, you can create your own content. You can be a TikTok creator. You can have a own YouTube channel. These days, there's so many opportunities to get your product out there. And if it's any good, people will tell you, because, the marketplace is the best way to find out if what you're doing has any value. If you make your videos and no one watches them, then maybe you need to try doing it differently. So one way of breaking into the business these days is to just create anything. It doesn't have to be, here's my 100-page screenplay and I'm going to go shoot a film and rent a camera and get a whole crew. You don't even need to do that. You can make a 3-minute short film or short something, or video, or even a lip syncing thing, anything that gets people's attention, that shows them that you have great ideas and you're talented, is going to get you noticed. So becoming a TikTok influencer is probably just as valuable as writing a great screenplay these days. So getting a following because you're creating a brand of content, that whether it's, you're doing horror or drama or comedy, whatever, creating something that people respond to. That's the big picture. Now, specifically, of course, there's the traditional ways of doing it. You can go to film school. That's what I did. That's, one way of doing it, which is a good way, but it also costs money. It's the opposite of, working and getting money. You're giving them money, but you're learning faster and you're getting the relationships quicker. So that's a good way of doing it if you can afford it and you've got the time and, the money. But it's totally not a requirement these days. So you can also just produce things. Maybe it's not videos for TikTok. Maybe it's you're putting on a play. Maybe you're going to write a play and you're going to put it on in your local theater group. You don't have to live in a big city to put on a play. You can put on a play anywhere. And if people respond to it, if the local newspaper says this is really amazing, then maybe you can do a play in a bigger city, and then you can keep working your way up. I mean, if you look at what's her name? Phoebe Waller-Bridges, is a huge writer now. She started doing plays in London, which, obviously that's a huge thing in itself. But now she's like a huge writer and is writing James Bond movies and is a showrunner and everything. And she's phenomenal, but she started by doing theater. So it's the difficulty of not having the resources to make a big production shouldn't stop you, because you can make a smaller production. You can make something with your phone and get it out there. And there's other ways of getting in from the side route. Like, for example, you can write a novel. If you write a good novel and you publish it, then you can say, hey, and I want to turn it into a movie. And then all of a sudden you're writing the movie version of your own novel. So you can write a graphic novel. Basically, there's so many different ways of producing content that can be in kind of any form, as long as it's good and people respond to it. So that's the big advice. You don't have to if this was 30 years ago, there probably would have been 3 ways to break in, and that's it. Go to film school, move to Los Angeles, and work at an agency in the mailroom. That's what they used to do in the olden days. And then you would make connections and try to like get your boss to read your script. But these days, you don't need to do any of that. You can just make whatever you're going to make, just make it. And then hopefully people will give you notes, and then the next thing you make will be better, because probably the first one won't be great, but it'll get better and better. And then you'll get a following, and then you can say, my next thing I want to do is bigger than the last one. And eventually you can start working, moving towards television, film, or theater, or whatever else you want to do.
Simpsons are well known for their couch gags, so I'm wondering, did you get to write your own couch gag?
I did not, actually. By time, The Simpsons is so famous now that in I was in season 25, believe it or not. So by time season 25 had come around, it was such a coveted thing to do the couch gag, is that they actually have outside people do things. And I think that like, for example, they might have the Game of Thrones version or the Guillermo del Toro version. So I don't remember who did the couch gag, but it was something that was done like independently, like some famous director like did the couch gag. And with The Simpsons, you can write in your script the gags that go in the beginning. They just don't necessarily use them. So for example, you can propose things. In my episode, I proposed, I don't know if I did write a couch gag that they didn't use, but you could do what's Bart writing on the chalkboard? You know, so you can write that. They just might not. And in fact, if I remember correctly, they ask you to write 10 of them. They say, give us 10 chalkboard gags and we'll pick. I think they did pick one of my 10. So they used my chalkboard gag. And in the later seasons, in the olden days, it was 4:3, so it was a square screen. And then when they went to 16:9, there's 2 more gags. There's like, what's in the cloud is different, flying by. That didn't, in the earlier seasons, there was no cloud gag. So they used my cloud gag too. I think I had Homer was like Mario and he hits the cloud and a coin comes out like Mario Brothers.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I did write that one as well. So I think they ask you to like come up with 10 chalkboard gags, couple cloud gags, what's on the sign, the Springfield sign, and like they use some of them and don't use other ones. It's just, you know, whether they like it enough. So I think I got some of them in and some of them not. But one of the things that I did write in my episode that did get used, which I was very happy, is I got to write my own Itchy and Scratchy.
And what was your Itchy and Scratchy then?
It was a takeoff on like the cooking shows where we're doing like a sous vide, you know, that technique, and like you see in fancy cooking shows where they boil the thing in a plastic bag to like get it the perfect temperature. And so there's a restaurant where I think Itchy is Scratchy's sous videing the eyeballs. It's kind of gross, but it's supposed to be a gourmet cooking show.
And how would you say to a young person wanting to develop their skills just now with everything closed, what would you say to them? Is there different ways like reading or writing or producing from your home that you could do just now?
Great. So I think, first of all, there's so many resources. I think that you can get on social media. There's writing groups on all the different social media. And like I'm it's not like a formal member, but like I participate a lot on Twitter in the writing community. It's not like you have to join the writing community. There is no the writing community, but all the writers of Twitter kind of follow it, not all of them, but we follow each other if you work in television and film. And then people who are aspiring to break in will follow those people who have already broken in, and we will retweet like someone who's giving good advice, say, oh, that's good advice, I'll retweet that. So you can follow the creators to see who's like giving good advice on, you know, how to deal with exposition in a scene, how to create a good character, what to do in a meeting, like how to get an agent. All these kinds of topics are discussed like at length on Twitter all the time. So that's one thing you can do, is just, if you want to learn about the ins and outs of it, It's all right there on social media, and it doesn't have to be Twitter. It can be any other place where people are doing it. I just know, because that's what I primarily use, that there's a lot of television people and film people that are writing. I just wrote something this morning on Twitter about bad exposition. That's why I had the word exposition in my head. It's my Twitter handle is at David H. Steinberg. You got to use the H because I'm not the other David Steinberg who has no H. I'm David H. Steinberg. So I was just writing about a scene from a pilot that I saw 20 years ago that stuck in my head all these years because it was so bad. Bad exposition, you really remember it. And exposition is the process of trying to explain the rules of your world without just saying, here's the rules of my world. So it's very tricky to try to like get people to understand what your rules are without just saying it up. And so when people do it badly, it's very jarring. And I was remarking about a pilot I saw a long time ago where it was set in the future, and there's two characters eating a bowl of cherries. And one character says to the other, remember when cherries used to have pits? And that's how you know it's set in the future, because you're supposed to watch it and go, oh, wait, no, cherries have pits. Oh, this must be the future when they don't have pits. And it's just so jarring because, like, why would anyone say that? It's just the strangest thing to say. You're just trying to like establish that it's the future in a really bad way. It's like if, you're on your phone and you're talking to your friend and you're like, hey, remember when phones had cords? Like, why would you say that? So anyways, we were just having a little discussion about bad exposition on Twitter this morning.
When you're doing something like The Simpsons, how you said it takes, that one took less than a month because it's one episode, but when you're doing something like No Good Nick, how many hours would that take to write, produce, film, edit before it goes onto screen?
Well, when you're the showrunner of a show, then it's a full-time job. You're working, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we would go to our offices where all the writers are, and we would be there all day long, breaking the episodes. And so you have a very sort of complicated schedule. You might be about to shoot episode 4 and you're writing episode 12 and thinking about episode 16. So you have a big room that's got all these things mapped out of what your plan is, and you have deadlines that you have to meet. So the process when they first greenlit the show was in May of 2018. So it took 4 months of pre-production where we were casting our actors, hiring the writers, getting our offices, getting a stage, building the sets, hiring all the personnel that were going to do everything. So that was about a 4-month process. And by the way, during that 4 months, after we hired the writers, at the end of it, we had, I believe, 7 scripts written. So out of the 20. So we were ahead by 7 when we shot the first one. So in September of 2018, we shot the first episode. And then for a multicam show like ours, where it's shot in front of a live audience and there's 4 cameras that are shooting simultaneously, unlike a lot of shows where it's only 1 camera, a multicam show is shot in 2 days. Half of it's shot without the audience, and then you have an actual performance in front of an audience where you are recording it live, and the laughing you hear is just the audience laughing. So you're basically able to shoot an episode in 1 week. On Monday, you're doing a table read. Tuesday, you're watching the actors do the run through on the stage. Wednesday's another run through. Thursday is the shooting the parts that can't be shot in front of the audience, and Friday is the show night. And then Monday, you're shooting the next episode. So it's 5 days from start to finish of the production. And then the following Monday, you're starting the next episode while you start editing the previous one. So the editing happens, that's post-production, while you're doing the next one. And then the typical schedule for a sitcom is you do 3 episodes per month. So you're shooting 3 in a row, and then you have a week off called hiatus where you're catching up on your editing and your script writing and whatever. So for a 20 episode series like ours was, we were able to start in September and finish production in April. So we finished the last shot in April, of 2019. And the first 10 episodes came out that week. When we stopped production, we'd already finished post-production and all the releasing process so that the first 10 episodes could come out in April of 2019. And at Netflix, unlike some places, there's a lot of work that happens afterwards because they're releasing it all over the world simultaneously. It has to be dubbed into every other language. So once you finish the episode, then it gets sent to the international team, and you have people in Greece doing it in Greek, Russia, Portuguese, everywhere. So all the dubbing happens. And then finally, those 10 episodes came out in April. And then the second 10 came out in August of 2019. So from May 2018, when they said, let's make this show, the 20th episode came out in August. So it's about 18 months from start to finish to do 20 episodes. Now, if you're only doing 10 episodes, it's not going to take as long. But that's the basic process for a live action show. And that's pretty quick because we're a multicam show, which can be shot very efficiently. Whereas a single cam show, if it's a half hour, is going to, I think, have 7 days, 5 to 7 days of production because you're going to be shooting every day. Maybe this isn't clear, but the difference is when you're doing a multicam show, there's 4 cameras that are like pointing at the stage and there's lights from above, and the actors just do their lines like a play. And there's enough cameras to capture all the angles that you can edit it together. A single camera show or a drama, which is also single camera, only has 1 camera. And so when 2 people are talking, the camera is shooting one direction. And then when they get the performance they want, you yell cut, and then they move the camera to the other direction, and they have to move all the lights because the lights are only pointing one way, and then the lights are pointing the other way. So it takes 3-4 times as long to do it that way because you have to move the cameras and move the lights. And so the good news is that a multicam show can be shot a lot faster. The bad news is that it looks more fake because the light's from above and it doesn't look like reality, whereas a single camera show or a drama looks more natural. So, but it takes longer to do. So a half-hour single camera show or a drama is going to have a longer production schedule. But long story short, about 18 months to 20 episodes.
I'm reading here that you pinned one of your favorite episodes that you wrote of Nogu Nick to your top of your Twitter page. So could you tell us more about that episode and why it's your favorite?
Well, it was such a emotional episode. It was towards the end, and I think we can do spoilers since the show's been out for over a year.
Yes.
So Jeremy has a secret. He's the boy, the son on the show, and the secret is that he's gay. And Nick finds out that he's gay, but she doesn't use it against him because she would never do that because that's a line she would never cross, even though she's trying to get revenge for what they did to her family. She doesn't ever say anything about that. But in this episode, I believe it's episode 19, Jeremy decides that he's going to tell his family. And because he's Jeremy and he has a certain way of doing things, he's going to put on a big presentation, and he's got a whole big evening planned. He's going to have a PowerPoint presentation. He's got music planned and a big dinner, and he's wearing a suit. And everything goes awry when his sister Molly and his mom come home, and they accidentally trigger his Alexa app to start the presentation early. And it's his coming out presentation, and they're confused about what's going on. And he just breaks down because this is not the way he wanted to tell them. But then he just tells them, I'm gay. And they, of course, accept him and say, we love you. And it's a very emotional scene. It's also a funny scene. It's a really weird scene because we're able to have a very big emotional moment wrapped in a scene that's kind of funny too. And it's a little bit like we were trying to pay homage to the famous scene from the show Ellen in the 90s where she comes out as gay. We were trying to do that for a modern audience. And we thought we were doing a great job. And it was and Kalama Epstein, who plays Jeremy, did such an amazing performance in that scene that we were really happy with the way it happened. What we kind of didn't expect is the reaction. So when the episode came out, it was so well received by the audiences that Netflix put it up on their homepage as some like scene you need to see, because they have hundreds of shows. They chose our show and said, you know, this is what we're about, Netflix. And because Netflix promoted that scene, they did that clip, it got seen by millions and millions of people who maybe didn't even know about the show. And then we started getting flooded with like positive responses and people saying like, you know, I'm gay. I've always had a hard time talking to my parents about it. This show has been so meaningful for me. I really, you know, appreciate it. And it's just, I mean, I can't even describe the number of responses we got and the amount of emotion. And you think you're doing something good, but you don't realize how impactful it is when you're making something for, you know, the world to see. You know, you're making a TV show, or you're making a movie, and you think, oh, I've got some great ideas for a comedy or a drama or a horror movie or whatever. And you think, wouldn't it be cool if people saw it? And you think, well, wouldn't it be cool if people like appreciated my ideas? But when it actually happens, you kind of don't really expect that level of emotion, and people just saying like, you know, how much this meant to them. And I won't go into details, but like people from all over the world were telling us their personal stories about how much this meant to them. And so it's really the thing that I'm most proud of. You know, I had a bunch of movies made, some stupid comedies, but this one is special because not only was it a great story that we got to tell the way we wanted to tell it, it had plot twists and great acting and everything, but it also had a huge impact on the world. I mean, look, it's not like we're, you know, curing cancer here and we've like done something that's bigger than it really is, but it was significant to a lot of people. And that is like really meaningful when you're a creative person and you're a creator, that people, you know, responded to it and they were impacted by something that we created. That's just such an amazing feeling. So that's why that's up as my pinned tweet, and I'm not going to ever take it down.
Okay. Are you working on any new projects just now that you're allowed to talk about?
Yes, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to have some projects in development during the pandemic. I won't go into too much detail because we're not allowed to talk specifics, but we have a project at Disney Channel that's an original movie that's live action, that if it gets, and you know, this is before they decide whether they're going to make it or not, but if it gets made, I think people are going to really love it. It's based on a book, but I can't tell you more about which book. And that's a live action Disney Channel movie. And we all have another project that we just sold to DreamWorks Animation. That's an animated movie that I really can't tell you anything about, but that is a really funny project. So the first project at Disney got a lot of action and it's funny, but it's also like got a lot of emotion and like deep like themes about, you know, identity, and like I think people are going to really like respond to it in an emotional way. The DreamWorks thing is really, really funny. It's just zany, crazy, and it still has emotion and still has great characters and all that, but it's just like crazy funny animated movie. So we don't know, probably we'll find out this year when we get down the road whether those projects will get made or not, but you know, hopefully they do. And those are the two things that we're working on right now. And you know, when you're a writer, you're always like have other things that no one's paying you to do that you're thinking about and you're writing, or you know, trying to get someone to buy, but there's all that stuff. But those are the two main things that we're working on.
The next segment on DYW Newsscape, I am calling Questions from Your Soul. They are questions inspired from Disney Pixar's newest film, exclusively released on Disney Plus, called Soul, and aims to help you at home get through the New Year's lockdown whilst having fun with your family at home or your friends on Zoom. So, David, where are you the most happiest just now?
When am I the most happiest?
When and where?
Well, I think that the challenge in my business is that you're the person that has to create something out of nothing. And that's very daunting, because when I wake up and I go to work, I have the blank screen and there's nothing there, and I have to make it have something. And I think especially during the pandemic, it's really hard to get motivated, and you say, well, you know, I don't feel like I want to work today, or, everything, the whole world's burning. I don't think I can write some jokes today.
Mhm.
But I think what I found is when I'm the most fulfilled is when I push myself to do it anyway. And it doesn't have to be 10 pages. It can just be one page or one funny line, one joke, one something. But just when you go from nothing to something, it's so fulfilling that that's what pushes you to actually do it.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, when I could say, well, you know what, did some good work today. It wasn't a lot, or maybe it was a lot, but whatever it was, there was something good in there. And that's when I really feel happy, is when I've created something.
To the viewers who will be seeing this, is there any music that you're listening to just now that you recommend?
I'm really into visualizing the scenes in my head with music. So I walk my dog many times a day listening to music, and I'm listening to CCFX, which is a great new band. I listen to Always. There's I'm trying to remember all the great bands that I'm thinking about. Oh, Beach House is just a really cool, chill band that has kind of moody music that if you listen to Beach House, you can visualize the scenes in your head of any type of thing you're writing, because it's very atmospheric. So almost all Beach House songs will work for any scene you're writing. Also Lemon Jelly, it's not distracting. It's good music to write to, because it's just kind of gets you in a good writing mood. Lemon Jelly, Beach House, those are my favorite bands.
What's your favorite Beach House song then?
Woo is the best. Dive is also great. But one thing, I have Spotify, and that I love is Spotify gives you at the end of the year, here's the songs you listen to the most. And I was like, yes, this is a great playlist. And I listened to Beach House Woo 100 times in 2020.
So is this the song?
That's it. And let's see, I'll look at my Spotify. I'll tell you the other one that
Let's see. And this is your other, let me see. And this is your...
The One to Wait by
CCFX. Is this
CCFX.
your Lemon Jelly?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then a song, my number one, I guess another song that I listened to the most in 2020 was The One to Wait by CCFX. So, yeah, so I mean, not that everyone necessarily noticed, but on No Good Nick, you have to pay for music when you put it in, when you put a song, and your budget doesn't necessarily allow you to buy whatever you want. You can't just put a Beatles song in the middle of a scene because you can't afford it. But we were able to get some really great music in No Good Nick. And one of the things that I really enjoy is I was really the person that kind of spearheaded which songs would kind of go over which scenes. So in episode 10, there's a song called The Song Beneath the Song that's playing in the last sequence that I really loved. And then there's another song in episode 20 that I can't remember which one we used, but there's in the final scene of episode 10 and the final scene of episode 20, those are very specific music choices that we spent a lot of money to get the one we wanted.
Can I ask you, is there any movies and TV shows that you would suggest people watch just now?
Well, I mean, I think Fleabag is always a movie. It's a TV series that it's just got amazing writing. If you want to see great writing, great characters. Ted Lasso is a show I'm watching that I've watched this past year on Apple, which was just a really great show about a positive character. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's an American football coach who goes to the UK to be a UK football coach. And he doesn't know anything about football, but he's just got a positive attitude. And it's just a really funny, but heartwarming show. So Ted Lasso is just a great show, especially if you're in the UK, you'll love it, because this is goofy American guy trying to run a football team.
And what about films? Is there any films that you're into just now?
I liked Booksmart, was a great film. Let's see. I actually, because I watch so much TV and film, when I watch something, I make a list because otherwise I won't remember what I've seen.
So do you watch more? Do you watch more Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, HBO?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost always doing streaming.
So which one's your favorite then?
Which streamer?
Yes.
Well, right now I'm really watching a lot of stuff on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of content there, but you can't, I mean, Netflix always has a lot of stuff too. So it's hard to not have Netflix. Let's see. I just saw Tenet. I didn't understand it, but we saw it. I mostly watch series. I don't watch too many movies. I'm trying to look for one that I did see recently that I can't remember the name of. Oh, The Half of It. That was a great film. Anyways, I won't read my list to you, but that was a great film that was on Netflix, I think. Maybe Hulu. I don't know. You can find it.
Who inspires you to do the job you do?
I don't know. I guess my dad was always a hard worker. He woke up at 5 a.m. every day and he went to his plumbing company, and he always told us that being your own boss is the best thing you could be. I mean, look, I understand that most people in the world have to work for someone else. That's just the way it goes. But if you can get to a point where you're your own boss, then you're always going to be happy to go to work. And he worked really hard because I think he worked harder when he was working for himself than he ever would for someone else, because you don't want to disappoint yourself. And so I don't know. I think that's a point of inspiration for me.
How would people describe you and your work?
Well, I always say, like, since I'm technically a comedy writer, I always feel a little bit weird about that because I don't think I'm that funny. I mean, I'm not a comedian. So I always say, well, when I write things, it's funny, but I try to make it good. That's the main thing I'm trying to do is have things be good, and they can be funny also. But I try to tap into universal themes, make things relatable, have real emotion, great characters. I'm not so concerned about like it being hilarious all the time, because I think that there's a quote that Walt Disney, like the actual man, said, whatever, 60 years ago. He said, when he was giving advice to his writers about how to write Disney movies, he said, for every laugh, there should be a tear. So that's a famous Walt Disney quote. And I totally agree with that. I feel like just having a sort of empty comedy where people are just making jokes, and you don't care, it's hard to connect with the material. I find things that are funnier when you have moments of drama and moments of real emotion. So that's kind of what I try to be. And I think that, I mean, I don't think I'm unfunny, but I think that I'm also try to pay attention and be a good listener and like be a nice person and like treat people really well. And when we had our writers in on No Good Nick in the writer's room, we tried to be really respectful of everyone. And we're not like the kind of bosses that were like, we certainly don't yell at anyone or like boss people around. It's more like a collaborative environment because I have 2 kids, and I think that, we kind of treat the other people like we treat our kids. It's supposed to be like a good environment for everyone. So hopefully people think that I'm a nice person. I'd rather be a nice person than anything else.
So what would you consider to be your greatest achievement? Would it be the...
Oh, wait, look, you're getting to see Beowulf. This is our bearded collie. And you're from Scotland, so you should recognize this is a bearded collie, the Scottish sheepdog.
Yes.
He's a Highland collie. Well, at least that's what they used to call him. Wait, I'm going to show you. What's he doing now? Oh. Beowulf, you made a good appearance. And his name's Beowulf, too.
So how do you name your dogs then?
Our kids named him. He's just, I guess they were reading Beowulf at the time. It seemed like a good name for a bearded collie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was too much thought put into it. I don't think he's a heroic figure.
Mm-hmm. So what would you consider to be your greatest achievement? Would you say it's that one episode we talked about earlier from No Good Nick?
Yeah, I think that's the one that I'm most proud of. I think that, there's something about the business of being a writer that is, they don't really tell you, is that you don't necessarily get to keep doing it for as long as you want. Like you spend your whole life trying to break into the entertainment business. You're like, I'm going to sell a screenplay. I'm going to sell a TV show. I'm going to do whatever. And then if you're lucky, it happens. And you think, now I've made it and my whole life is made. But what they don't tell you is that you have to keep doing that over and over again, because there's no job security. It's not like, you've got a pension or a guaranteed job the next year, and you can make a movie, and even it could be a hit movie. And then the next year they're like, well, what are you doing now? So I always tell people that big picture, my greatest career success is that I'm still doing it. So I've been writing professionally for 21 years, and I've had great years and I've had terrible years where I didn't make any money. But during that whole time, I've kept doing it, and I've kept my career going where I still have things that are hopefully going to get made. And to keep working consistently for that long is a feat in itself. I think when you're first starting out, you think, well, I'm going to be the biggest writer and I'm going to make the most money. And I think that's very common when you're young, that you're going to make a big splash and be a big successful whatever. But when you're older, you kind of would look back in hindsight and realize that just being able to do what you love for a long time, for basically your whole life, is the success story, and not getting onto some list of most successful people or going to parties or whatever. Just to keep doing it day in and day out is the success story.
So is that behind you season 1 No Good Nick cushion?
Yes, we have a whole bunch of pillows. This is so you might have seen these. They used to advertise these on the internet all the time. So it goes they have sequins, so it reverses, and it's supposed to be a secret reveal.
Wow.
And on the back is the crew photo that we took on
the
last week of production. So here you can see our actors. There's Sienna, and there's Melissa. I think I can't see backwards, but then that's me and that's my wife, and there's the other writers, and there's the rest of the crew all over the place. And there's over here is that's Josie.
Wow.
Anyways, so in the back is, so we have a lot of them. We have a lot of stuff from the show. I have 4 of those pillows.
Wow. Can you suggest a way for young people to cope during lockdown?
Well, I mean, one thing is to try to be productive if you can. I mean, you can't be mad at yourself if it's not possible, but if you get involved in a project, it kind of takes your minds off of things. If you're working on a script or a novel or a play or a video or whatever, focusing on that thing kind of takes your mind off of all the other stuff that, you don't want to think about. The other thing is to make time to connect with your friends, even if you can't see them in person. My kids are involved in a bunch of different groups that they do weekly game nights on Discord, and they have movie nights that they do with an app that lets the movie play for all people in different locations at the same time, so they can be chatting about the movie and watching the movie at the same time. So taking the extra step to actually see your friends, virtually, and to communicate with them. I mean, that's the best advice I can offer, is just, and to try to organize into a group to cope with it together. Because I mean, the best thing you can do is to go through it with someone else.
What have you been doing to cope during lockdown?
That's the main thing, is trying to work, and to get things done takes mind off things. And I go on walks with with so many walks every day. I take him 6-7 times a day just to like get outside with the mask on, but walking around the block just to see the sun and not stay cooped up inside. I know we're not really supposed to go outside, but to walk around the block with your dog is okay. So being able to get outside a little bit helps. And we've also been, doing crossword puzzles and board games and jigsaw puzzles, just like kind of fun activities that are all just kind of lying around our house. You're walking by, oh, here's a jigsaw puzzle, I'll do that for 10 minutes. Oh, crossword puzzle, I'll work on that. So just things to like pass the time when you're stuck home.
So for the viewers that are in the UK and Scotland, what is the pandemic like out where you're from?
The weird thing is that it's hard to say because we don't leave the house except to go on these walks that I'm talking about. We don't go anywhere. So you hear the news reports about what's happening, and it could be like 2 miles from our house, but you don't see it in person because you don't leave the house. So we don't go anywhere. Like our groceries are all delivered. There's fortunately people who are able to shop, and you give them big tips because they're doing this great service. But from what the news is saying is that like 1 in 5 people in Los Angeles County have COVID. And you look around and go, well, is that true? Because you don't see any people. You don't see, like, I'm not in a hospital. You hear the stories about how they're rationing oxygen and that there's, 4,000 people dying every day and there's not any beds. And it sounds horrible. And I'm sure it is horrible, but we're just stuck home. We don't leave the house. So I don't see any of it. So I'm sure it's similar to that, in a lot of places where, I believe all the news reports, of course, but you're not seeing it on a day-to-day basis unless you're working in a hospital or some other place, because we're doing, the right thing, I think, and staying home, wearing a mask when we go out and trying to stay safe.
Yes, that is all the time we have here on DYW Newsscape with me, your host, Aidan, and I just want to give another big shout out and thank you to David for giving his time up today to give advice to the Moray young people. You've been watching DYW Newsscape with me, your host, Aidan, and you have been on our YouTube channel. Thank you, stay safe. Remember, hands, face, space if you live in England, or if you're in Scotland like me, remember facts, and we will all get through this, and we will get back to see David's writing very soon. Thank you.